love our next guest in Author's Corner. We spent some time off the air. Barbara Chevalier wrote a book called Keep Searching for Blue Jays, and it's incredible, a miraculous account of life beyond our world. That has to intrigue you and reel you in, right? It definitely did me, and then our conversation was mind-blowing, honestly. Barbara, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So it's true. We had a great conversation talking about how you got to where you are and your philosophy, which I think is similar to my philosophy. And if you really can gravitate toward it, for people listening, we're going to get there. But if you gravitate toward this philosophy, I think your life just unfolds before you in so much of a different way than that constant struggle that you have. But first, let's talk about why you wrote the book.
Okay. I always wanted a story to write about that was worthy of writing about, and I just never felt like the right one came along. And then, they say you got to be careful what you wish for. It ended up in 2006, coming home to a roped-off, crime scene, taped-up home, and that is just where it all started. And I knew after we ended up at the hospital and standing over my son just a few days later, this was that story.
So in coming back to that and seeing what happened, your youngest son, Brian, who had to be taken by air ambulance to a trauma hospital after what the police told you was an accident. Tell us what happened in the end there with Brian.
So Brian was care-flighted. We weren't told that he had even been shot, just that, quote, there had been an accident. And I knew something was severely wrong because none of them would look me in the eyes when they would tell me that. So in their minds, he was gone. And so we get down to the hospital. 3.5 days later, they bring him off the ventilator. He had been shot in the chest in the front, and then turned around when he realized that it wasn't a paint gun or a joke, and was shot in the back. And that was with 9mm, loaded with hollow points at point-blank range. So hindsight, you can understand why they probably made those assumptions. Brian was 14 at the time. And so when they pulled him off the ventilator, Brian couldn't wait to tell me something. But you can't speak when you have one of those endotracheal tubes down your throat. And so you have to blow and prove that you can breathe on your own. And so anyways, they finally pulled that after he met the requirements. And the first thing he was chomping at the bit to tell me was I went to heaven and I saw God. And I knew when he started talking to me about what he had witnessed and experienced and what went on. And he told me that he told me what he looked like, what God looked like, how they interacted, told me about judgment and all of these nice, warm, fuzzy feeling things. And with all the trauma that Brian had, he was still he was smiling. He was reliving those experiences. And so I just knew standing there, this is that story that is going to change so many people's lives. And I just felt that there was an urgency to get it written. In the moment, I didn't realize it was going to take as long to get it written. But at the end of the day, it's there. And there is just an energy about it. And the way that my son responded to everything was just otherworldly.
Yeah, wow. Again, that's that near-death experience. And so, imagine what you take what you saw from what happened with your son. Now, as you said, you finally get down to it. You have this book. You put this book together. What do you want people to know? What should people do when people get caught up in their struggle bubble? Barbara, you know this, and then they have things that happen to them and they can't seem to get out of that cycle.
I really want for people to shine a light on our own mental health and how important that is for us to live productive and industrial lives. And some of the biggest takeaways are that as much as we're told we're powerless, when you really step back and remove emotion, you come to a place where you just understand that what you think, what you speak, and the emotions you tie to things, that actually draws things to us and or repels things from us. And so I would say that it's not necessarily to be super positive all the time, because if you go too far to the left and you're super negative, or you go too far to the right and you're overly positive, either way, you're fibbing to yourself, or you're toxic and you're repelling. And so I've found that there's a straight and narrow, balanced, centered place to be. And we're all human, and we can only take so many things on our plate and so many traumas before those things begin to compound. And so what is important to me is that we understand that mental illness or mental health issues are a result of a person running out of resources to adequately cope with the situation or situations at hand. And generally, what I've found across my life, because I've always been fascinated with near-death experiences and psychology and the brain in general, is that we stay within that centeredness and just allow life to unfold. Some of us are so frantically running around trying to figure out what our purpose is, that if our purpose was right in front of our face and right under our nose, we wouldn't recognize it for one of a couple of things. One of them being that we're so dadgum working hard to figure it all out. Birds are just birds. They don't say, what do birds do? Mm-hmm. And so I would venture to say that each of us are, like I'm Barbara flavored Kool-Aid, and so it just comes to a place of self-acceptance and self-love, and then also to stick to that straight and narrow and understand that we do have choices, and we are able to be empowered even in the face of situations like with my son. And so I believe that when we are given something of that nature, that the opposite holds true. If we're in this fallen world, as people label it, then that means there's duality. And so with duality, if I'm given that measure of what we would look at as a calamity, then there's also an equal portion and measure of a blessing. It depends on my response as to what comes back to me. And so the only difference is our input and our energy into every person, place, and thing. And so sometimes we hold on to prejudices against, maybe some red car ran us off the road and we knew it was a tourist. Does that make all red cars bad? No, they're an inanimate object. And so I would say to be more open and make sure that we interact and in our lives, build our lives, and then keep our mind, mouth, and emotions lined up at least 80% of the time. That's where I find seems to be the magic of, because a lot of times I'll be thinking one thing, saying something else, and then have an emotion that's, maybe somewhere one side negative or one side positive. When I just am, and that's interesting, I am, mm-hmm. then I am just being. I think a lot of us have gotten into the rat race of doing so that we can have, so that someday we may be able to be. And where that's brought us is that a lot of us don't even know what a perfect day or what it is that would make us happy might even look like, and it took me a few months to literally sit down and go through the motions. The first time I wrote down what a perfect day would be, I had an 8-hour workday in there. That is not a perfect day, so it's just understanding we have choices, even if we don't feel like we have choices. It's the way that we frame and respond to things. And I would venture to say that those calamities are generally tied to our purpose, and they are also opportunities.
Wow, you said it all. I mean, it's perfect. And the stories and what happened here, this is a true story, and we just touched the surface of it. I agree, and we have that same philosophy that I am, and it's funny, and I think people out there can relate to the sitting down and what's the perfect day, and you write, 8 hours of work, which is crazy. We don't want to give too much away. Pick up this book, Keep Searching for Blue Jays. Pick it up on Amazon or wherever great books are sold. Barbara, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely.